want to say good morning to all of those who have joined us this morning on Facebook and on YouTube. We're glad that you have joined us here. And I want to wish a very special and a very specific Happy Mother's Day to all of our mothers, those who are watching and those who are here this morning. What a great day it is. I heard about a news article that had been published in the Knoxville News Sentinel. And the news article made this comment. It said that the police chief, whose name was Phil Keith, was in the middle of a council meeting there in Knoxville, Tennessee. And as he was there in the middle of that city council meeting, all of a sudden his phone rang. And he looked down and he realized that it was a call from his mother. And so the chief excused himself and immediately went to the lobby and took the call. And sure enough, it was his mother on the other line, and she made this comment, "Philip Keith, are you chewing gum?" To which he stated, "Yes, ma'am, I am." And she said, "Well, I just want you to know it looks awful. You spit that gum out right this minute." To which he so dutifully did. He removed the gum and went back into his meeting. You know, of all the holidays and of all the annual events, Mother's Day is absolutely one of the most special. You ever ask yourself why? Why is that so special? The answer to that is because we all have mothers. We all have moms. You ever thought about what all you learned from your mother? You know, from our father, we learned discipline, and we had our fathers who not only did they discipline us, but they guided us. Especially for our men who are here and those who are listening, it was our fathers who gave us our personal work ethics. But I must tell you something, it was our mothers who taught us how to love. And it was our mothers who gave us our personal worth. I must give you a personal note that I am here largely because of the influence and the impact that my parents had on me. I'd like to share a composition that my dad gave me before he passed away. It's called The Profile of a Mother. Here's the way it goes. A mother appears to be a normal human being. She has all the physical features as all people have. 2 eyes, 2 hands, 2 arms, 2 feet, and they're all connected to one body. That's what you may see if you just look on the exterior, the outside of a mother. But if you were ever a child, then you know that your mother has at least 3 sets of eyes. 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and 1 on each side, so that she can see those things that you have tried to hide from her. She has 1 on each side of her head to protect that cookie jar, no matter where she's standing in the kitchen. All are capable of seeing through wood and brick and plaster, so that she can tell exactly what's going on behind those closed doors. Mom has those bionic ears. She can hear a dirty word that's whispered from a block away. She can even hear a complaint that only thought, especially when it's about that unpleasant task that she has just assigned you to. With her many arms and her many hands, she prepares a meal, finds Dad's shirt, changes a diaper, runs the vacuum, and spanks 2 fighting children all at the same time. with strong, fast legs. She can move about the house like a speeding bullet. She patrols the streets, stops a fight in the backyard, catches a tennis ball before it is flushed down the toilet, prevents a child from falling out of a tree, moves all the toys from the driveway before Dad gets home, and does that all at the same time. Her endless supply of energy can only be a God-given attribute. She's the first to rise in the morning. She has breakfast ready for her brood of, and as they get up, she gets each child ready for school. She is both a barber and a beautician, a fashion consultant, chairman, budget director, purchasing agent, paramedic, mechanic, veterinarian, interpreter, travel agent, interior decorator. She's always the last one to go to bed. With a tender kiss, Mom can heal everything from a cut finger to a broken heart. And with her kiss, she can convince a balding 50-something-year-old man that he's still just as handsome now as he ever was. Her ability to love is exceeded only by God's love itself. Her love grows with her children. And it is impossible to tell the success or the failure of her children by her love. There's no depths to which a child will fall that will diminish her love. And there are no heights of success that a child can achieve that will increase her love. Her love is protective, tender, consistent, understanding, forgiving, unchanging, unselfish, giving, contagious, comfortable, and everlasting. The nearest thing that we can see in this world to God's love is the love of a mother. You see, we find that there's no one quite like our mothers. As a matter of fact, it's been said that mother and love go together like peanut butter and jelly. And so on this Mother's Day of 2021, I believe that there is no better passage for us to study than the love chapter. That which is in the Bible that describes the agape love of God, which is necessary for mothers and fathers and sons and daughters and all the rest of us too. And so today, I want us to hear this message, Revealing Love on Mother's Day. I'm going to ask you to take your Bibles and turn with us, if you will, to 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians 13. Here in this 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, we find, first of all, a place of love, the portrait of love, and the permanence of love. I want to begin with the first three verses as we look, first of all, at the place of love. And so there, starting in verse 1 of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, we find these words. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. Though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing. And so we find here in these first three verses the place of love, and we find that place is that love is superior to all other traits. What Paul tells us here is that first of all, the place that we find love is that love is superior to eloquent words. Listen to what he says again there in verse 1. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love, I have become sounding brass and a clanging cymbal. What we find here is that love exceeds and excels over all other things. Love is a vital principle, and without it, all of the other endowments, including excellence in communication, are all in vain. You may have met a great Bible teacher. You may have heard in ministry the most outstanding orator with the most eloquent of presentations. But I remind you of this, that if it was presented more for the knowledge than for the sake of edification, then it was just simple, empty information. Now, the world has heard enough loveless sermons. And the world has heard enough endless, loveless lectures. And so Paul says here that if you could speak like an angel, what good would it do if love was not present? There was a little boy who was reading the Bible once, and he saw a picture there in the Bible and the listing of the angels. And he read under there about under the heading of the cherubim and seraphim. And the little boy came to his father and said, "Daddy, what's the difference in a cherubim and a seraphim?" The dad said, "Well, son, I don't know, but they went together." He said, "We'll look it up." And they went to the Bible dictionary and they began to look, and they found that the difference between the cherubim and the seraphim, he found here that the cherubim comes from a Hebrew word which means knowledge. And a seraphim comes from a Hebrew word that stands for flame. And he went on to read, and the explanation was this, as he read this to his son, went on to say that it's commonly believed that the cherubim were therefore the angels who excelled in knowledge and understanding. And it's the seraphs who were the angels who excelled in love. The little boy, after he thought about that, said, "Daddy, I believe that when I die, I'll be a seraph." Dad said, "Why?" He says, "Because I think I'd rather love God than know everything." You see, love is superior to even the most eloquent words. But we also find that love is superior to wisdom. We find that in verse 2. If you will, take and look there again in verse 2, and we find these, "And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing." Look at that verse very closely. If a person could unlock all the mysteries of the entire universe and call forth the most unbelievable faith to even remove mountains from your presence, he says it's zero without love. What's he saying? Basically, what Paul is saying here is that don't come around talking about your spiritual gifts and all the great things that you think you can do if you're not loving one another. He's saying here that love exceeds prophecy. You see, what we find is that love is superior to knowledge. He goes on here to say that love exceeds faith. Notice what he says here, but don't have love, he says, I am nothing. Now, we understand that faith is wonderful. Without faith, none of us can be saved. But what Paul is saying here is that you may have enough faith to remove a mountain, but if you cannot remove the malice from your own heart, what good is it? Love is superior to wisdom. Now, in verse 3, we find this, that love is superior to works. Think about this for a moment. There in verse 3, here's what it says, and though I bestow all of my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and I have not love, it profits me nothing. Suppose you packed up all of your goods and all of your furniture and everything that you owned, and you gave it to the Red Cross. And though you took all of your money and you donated all of your money and possessions to the United Fund, but you had not love, what does it profit? There may be some who says, well, a man would not do that. Sure he would. Sure he would. I want to remind you of this. You can give without loving, but you cannot love without giving. What good is it if a man gives everything that he has, but he doesn't love? What he's doing here is some people give instead of themselves rather than giving themselves. Sometimes it's cleaner and it's neater to just write a check than to give ourselves. Sometimes we find that it's easier to write the check and go on than to stop and to show your love for someone else in need. You know someone in this world who is in need. Can I tell you something? The world doesn't need more money. It needs more people who will love them where they are. It needs more people who will say this, I will give myself to you. Notice the verse again. Though I bestow all of my goods and I feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but I have not love, it is of no profit at all. It profits me nothing. So we find here that love excels charity. It exceeds charity. Love is superior to works. And we find that in fact is the place of love. But I want you to look secondly at the portrait of love. You ever ask yourself, what does love look like? In these next verses, Paul explains what love does and what love does not do. Biblical love is a decision, not just a feeling. I want you to listen very carefully to these verses, starting here now in verse 4. And I want you to picture the portrait of love. He says, love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not pride itself. It is not puffed up. Love does not behave rudely, does not seek itself, is not provoked, thinks no evil, does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. My goodness. What a beautiful portrait of love this is. It's been said that there's no better description of true love than what is found in these verses, that love suffers long and is kind. You know what that means? It means it is love that enables you to be patient. That's what this love suffers long. It means that you are patient. You know, we look and we hear other people's children, and sometimes we become very impatient, but when it's our child, there's a patience there. What we've heard here is that people say that love is blind. Can I tell you something? Love's not blind. Love sees more. Love not only sees, but it's love that forgives. Love is patient. It is love that forgives 70 times 7. Love doesn't give to a person exactly what they deserve. No, it's love that gives the person exactly what they need. And so we find that love enables us to be patient. Love enables us to be kind to another. A little girl was heard to be saying a prayer, and here's her prayer. He said, Lord, make all the bad people good and make all the good people nice. Wouldn't it be great if all the good people could just be nice? See, we find that it's love that enables us to be patient with others, especially those in our house. It is love that is long-suffering. Love enables us to be kind. It enables us also not to envy someone else. Let me ask you a question. Let me see if you would take a test with me. A test to see if you're an envious person. Here's the test. Do you rejoice in the success of other people? Now, before you answer that, let me say, I'm not talking about someone who is in a completely different field or within the social circle that you're in. No, I'm talking about one of your peers. I'm talking about one of those that you go to school with or one of those that you work with. Can you rejoice when someone else succeeds? Can you rejoice with them in their accomplishment? How do you respond? How do you react? How do you feel when someone else receives a blessing? Do you cringe when someone else has been praised? Here's the result of that test. If you do, then dear friend, you need to load up on love. Love for others. It's been said that envy is the rottenness of the bones. It hurts you far, far more than it does the person that you envy. Love will enable you not to envy someone else. Love will enable you to humble yourself. Think about that. As we look back at that verse, we find that love does not parade itself. It is not puffed up. Let me tell you something about this. Did you know that love and pride cannot dwell in the same heart? Let me say that again. That love and pride don't dwell in the same heart. You can't do that because, listen to this, you can either be big-headed or you can be big-hearted. But you can't be both. Love is not puffed up. You see, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. Knowledge puffs us up and swells our chest out. But it is love that helps us to focus on someone else. And so when we find this, we understand that knowledge puffs up and that love builds up. It is love that enables us to be humble. Jonathan Edwards, who was one of the greatest preachers of all time, made this comment about this. Listen to what he says. He says, "Nothing sets a man so much out of the devil's reach as humility." Listen to what I just said. Nothing sets a man so much out of the devil's reach as humility. Let that soak in for a minute. You see, what humility is it's putting other people first. It's not puffing your head and puffing your chest out and allowing you to be all puffed up. So we find here that in this, that love bears injustice without anger and despair. I remind you again that love is a verb. Love is an action. It is active. And it is mild under provocation and ill usage. Love produces good manners with others and courtesy at all times. Love is pure. It is not jealous. It is not displeased with the success of others. Love never embarrasses the owner or the recipient. We find in this verse that love is peaceful, that love is not rash, that love is what will take the back seat and allow someone else to take the light. Love doesn't brag. It does not boast about itself. But then I want you to look there at verse 5. And in verse 5 it says this: love does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, thinks no evil. Think about what this is. It's saying that love is polite. Think about that. It means doing nothing to cause shame to someone else. Love prefers others. There's no selfishness found in this type of love. It seeks the good of others. And friend, I want you to know that's the kind of love that every one of us would long to have. That's the kind of love that every single one of us would desire to be able to live our entire life and to feel that kind of love. The challenge for us today is for husband and wife, for parent and child, for friend. Do you give that kind of love? These are the things that challenge our heart on this Mother's Day, because we've learned how to love from our mothers. And so we find here that love does not behave rudely. Love does not seek its own. It's not easily provoked. It thinks no evil. Love is polite. There's no selfishness. It seeks to do good for others. Friend, love enables you to be courteous, right along with someone else who has been selfish. Notice where it says, love does not seek its own. I believe it was Bill Gothard who made this comment. He said, when you teach people their rights, you have a revolution. But when you teach them their responsibilities, you have a revival. Love is not self-seeking. And every one of us desire to have that kind of love. So we find here that love is not easily provoked. You see, when love holds the rein of your soul, then there's little danger of provocation to anger and spiteful actions that lead to sin. We find that love does not condemn others. Love is not malicious. It is not disposed to find fault in other people. Then I want you to look here in verse 6. It says, but does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Think about the impact of that in our life. Love exhibits propriety. Notice that it does not sympathize with evil. It does not delight in anything that does not conform to the standard of truth and righteousness. Think about that for a moment. Allow that to sink into your heart. If we could find out and to follow this pattern for love, how it would change not only our life, but it would change our church, and it would change our community, and it literally would change our entire world. If we would quit beating our own chest and worried that we're not getting all that we deserve. I know you've heard me say this before. Dear Lord, please don't give me what I deserve. And that's why this is so important for here, that love rejoices in the virtues of others, not their vices. Now look with me there in verse 7 that says, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Think about that for just a moment. Love is pleasant. Love maintains a disposition that refuses to make public or to avenge the faults of other people. It refuses to. Love is not suspicious of other people or other actions. It trusts others. When I give premarital counseling, or even sometimes I've given marital counseling to couples that come, and I try very hard to focus on this, because we understand that this is the outline of how we are to treat other people, especially our spouse. Wives, how would you love to have that kind of love from your husband? Husbands, how would you love to have that kind of love from your wife? What a beautiful portrait this truly is. It maintains that disposition that refuses to find fault in others. Think about this. Was not Jesus the one who did that? He demonstrated that type of love for other people. So what we find here is, to this point, we have looked at the place of love, and we have now seen the portrait of love here on this Mother's Day. The third thing that I would like for us to see as we get into our word here is the permanence of love. I shared with you earlier that love is an action verb. True love is so much more than just a word to say, I love you. It literally means that I put my words into actions. Every one of us have heard someone say, I love you, but then treated us badly. They said those things that hurt us and cut us to the core. And we began to ask the question, if your words were true, if you say that you love me, then why did you treat me that way? Why did you act that way toward me? Why did you cut me to the core? That's why every one of us need to hear the importance of the understanding of what true love honestly is that is found in this chapter. I'm going to ask you to pick up there in verse 8 as we begin to see the permanence of love. Love never fails. But whether there are prophecies, they will fail. Whether there are tongues, they will cease. Whether there is knowledge, it will vanish away. Do you notice that everything that he had talked about to this point, he is now re-emphasizing in this part? Verse 9. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when that which is perfect has come, then that which is in part will be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child, and when I became a man, I put away childish things. Boy, I could preach a message on that one. Do you know you don't have to teach a child to be selfish? You know one of the very first words that a child learns is mine? Mine. We've been raising a little 2-year-old in our home, and I'll tell you, it's amazing how many times we hear the word mine, 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 mine. So this is for all of our husbands who are here and our wives who are here. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I even thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. Every one of us need to hear that. And on this Mother's Day, every one of us need to be reminded of that. Verse 12. Now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I also am known. And now abide faith, hope, love. These three, but the greatest of these is love. When we talk about the permanence of love, I want you to look again there at verse 8 that says this. The permanence of love is in the first sentence. Love never fails. Do you believe that? The Bible says it, but do you believe it? Because if you believe it, you would put it into action that love never fails. No matter how you're treated, love never fails. That's the permanence of that. Love will always abide. Love will always, it should always be exercised. Here's a note that I want you to hear clearly. Love can be adapted to all circumstances in which you're placed. Let me say that again. Love can be adapted to all circumstances that you will be faced with this week. That's why I think that this message is so very important for us. Not only to allow us to remember what love is and be reminded of that again on this Mother's Day, but also to look into the coming week. Love is not harsh. Love, the permanence here is that love never, ever fails. But I want you to look also at not only the permanence of love, but the preeminence of love. And we look at that here in the last verse. Look at the preeminence of love there in the last verse, in verse 13 that says, "And now abide faith, hope, love." But the greatest of these, the preeminence here is love. You see, it's love that's the greatest of all gifts. For it is love that makes all of the rest of the gifts grateful. Think of it this way. Love is the one thing that every one of us need. Now, I said to you that love was an action verb. Can I also say this to you, that love is a choice? Love is a choice. You ever been in an argument with someone, and because you tried to show love and they rejected it, next thing you know, you're right in the middle of the battle with them? You know, the Bible tells us that kind words and love are the things that will dispel that argument. Think about that for a moment. So the next time you're in a heated argument with a spouse or a brother or sister or a parent or a friend or a child, whoever it is, remember that. That's so, so very important. F.E. Marsh tells a story of some young preacher boys who went to the home of a great minister of a past generation. He didn't give the name, so I couldn't tell you who the minister was. But I understand that he was a great pastor and preacher and evangelist. But when these young pastors got there and they went into his home, they had been invited in, and they found that he was in his study and that he was preparing to go into a meeting where there was an extremely strong debate that was expected. And here was this old preacher man, this old pastor, who was reading and studying 1 Corinthians chapter 13. And he was praying about what he had been reading over and over again. And he was literally praying that God might use these words to direct his conduct. Because love never fails. The aged minister here stated to these preacher boys, stated that he felt that he needed to be reminded again by the restraining hand of the divine grace, and to have this calming power and be reminded again of how it is love that pushes away harsh speech. And he prayed that as he was going into this, that God would grace him with love, because love never fails. The greatest of these is love. Think about what we've heard today. Think about these words from our text that has again defined for every one of us what true love is. You know, for many of us, we learned that love from our mothers. As we walk away today from this message, my prayer for every one of you and for myself is that God will teach us again what true love is and how we are to love. I remind you of this in closing. That the Bible is very clear when it says we know love because God is love. And He first loved us. Would you join me this morning as we pray? Father, this message has touched our heart once again. This message has reminded us of not only a mother's love, but it's defined for us again how we are to love others, even when we don't feel loved, even when we feel that we are being shamed. But God, remind us again. Remind us this week, over and over again, that we are to love because you love us. Father, I pray that feature within us, that love that's within us that comes only from you, will well up inside us, that we can love others just as you have loved us. And I pray this in Jesus' name.